You have been told a story, a clean one, an easy one, that Loki was adopted, that Odin found him, that he was raised beside Thor, that he was somehow a wounded son trying to belong. Ah, but the old stories do not say this, not once. And the difference matters more than most people realize. Because if you read the Old Norse myths carefully, and that is the part modern audiences struggle with, we want explanations, we want emotional logic, we want to know, why would the gods trust him? But myth does not always work like modern storytelling. And sometimes a thing exists beside you not because it's good, not because it deserves to, but because reality itself demands it. And Loki feels like one of those things. In the Marvel films, Loki is an adopted son, a jealous brother, a wounded prince. And that version works beautifully for modern drama. But the Loki of the Eddas, he is not framed like a damaged child. He is a force woven directly into the fabric of the gods themselves, a disruption already seated at the table. The closest thing we ever get for an origin story for Loki's place among the Aesir comes from a single moment in the poetic Edda, Lokinsenna, the flighting of Loki, one of the most uncomfortable poems in the entire Norse campus. A feast, an argument, and then Loki walks into the hall. Not sneaking, not invading, walking in openly, and the room hates him immediately. That matters, because it tells us this has happened before. And then Odin says something strange, something modern adaptations almost always ignore. He reminds the gods that he and Loki once mixed blood together, that they swore an oath, and Odin declares that Loki must be allowed to drink. Think about what that means. Loki's not there because he's forgiven. He's there because he's bound, ritually, sacredly. The Allfather himself tied his fate to this being, and the myths have never explained why. And that silence is important, because the Norse myths often refuse to explain things modern audiences desperately want explained. Why does Odin seek forbidden knowledge, even when it destroys him? Why does Loki remain among the Aesir, betrayal after betrayal? The myths do not answer. They simply present the tension, and sometimes the tension is the meaning. Because Loki does not behave like a villain in the early myths, not consistently. Sometimes he causes disasters, sometimes he fixes them, sometimes he humiliates the gods, sometimes he saves them entirely. Without Loki, Thor never gets Mjolnir. Odin never receives Sleipnir. Several treasures of the gods are never forged. But because of Loki, Baldur also dies. Ragnarok comes and the world burns. And that contradiction is the point. Modern storytelling often wants morality to stabilize. Heroes become better and villains become worse. But Loki never stabilizes. He moves. Like flame. Useful in one moment, catastrophic in the next. The gods know this, and yet they keep him close. Why? Because the Norse cosmos is not built on purity. It's built on tension, order beside chaos, civilization beside wilderness, gods beside giants, and Loki stands directly on that border. People often forget Loki is not Aesir by birth, he's Jotun, a being tied to the same primordial forces the gods constantly struggle against. And yet, so is much of Asgard. Even Odin himself descends partly from giants, which means the line between god and enemy was never clean to begin with. And then there's Loki's mother. Marvel calls Loki a prince, but in the old tales, his mother Luvi may have been something more ancient, a goddess or a queen among giants. Her name carried such weight that Loki chose it over his father's, Luveson, son of Luvi. And yet he's one of the only major figures in Norse myth that carries his mother's name. That matters, because names in the Norse world were never casual things. His father was Fodbrati, cruel striker, a name associated with lightning. But Loki does not carry his name into legend. He carries hers. And maybe that tells us something. Maybe Loki was never meant to embody simple masculine power like Thor. Maybe he inherited something older, something stranger. Not the storm itself, but the fire it leaves behind. So no, Loki did not come to Asgard as an orphan child looking for a family. The myths tell a far more unsettling story. He was already there. He stayed because he and Odin mixed their blood together in ritual and swore themselves to one another. Not father and son, blood brothers, bound as equals beneath sacred oath. That is another modern misunderstanding. The Norse world is not divided into good beings and evil beings. It's divided into forces trying to hold reality together, while other forces pull it apart. And sometimes the same being does both. That is Loki. The reason Loki feels so unsettling in the original myths, he breaks categories, not just morally, cosmically. He shifts shape, shifts allegiance, shifts identity. He fathers monsters. He becomes a mare and births Slipnir. He mocks masculinity while violating its expectations constantly. He speaks truths no one ever wants spoken, even in humor. He destabilizes the room around him, especially in humor. And I think the modern adaptation softened this intentionally, because the Eddic Loki is difficult to market cleanly. He's too fluid, too contradictory, too mythic. You cannot pin him down to a hero or a villain or a victim or a trickster alone. The myths resist that simplification, and maybe that is why he survives so powerfully in cultural memory. Because Loki embodies something ancient people understood very well, that chaos is not outside the hall, it's sitting at the table already, and Odin knows it. That may be the most haunting part. The Allfather has some say, seeker of wisdom, master of sacrifice, speaker with the dead, and yet he chose to bind himself with Loki anyway, as though wisdom itself required proximity to destruction, as though knowledge and catastrophe were somehow brothers. And maybe that is why the myths never explain how Loki came to Asgard, because the question itself may be wrong. Fire does not arrive in a wooden hall. Conflict does not arrive in the human heart. Entropy does not arrive in the world. They are part of existence from the beginning, waiting, necessary, and dangerous. And eventually, everything burns. The Old Norse did not fear Loki because he was evil. They feared him because he was true. And truth is rarely safe. See you down the road.